It was a chilly October morning in 2017, the kind where the air bites at your fingertips and the leaves crunch under your shoes. In a small, sleepy town nestled in the heart of Ohio, 14-year-old Aisha Thompson set out for school like she did every day. She was a bright kid, always smiling, with a backpack slung over one shoulder and earbuds blasting her favorite music. Her mom, Tanya, waved her off from the porch, shouting, "Love you, be safe," as Aisha turned the corner onto Maple Street. It was 7:42 a.m. The school was only 3 blocks away, a walk she'd made 1,000 times. But that morning, Aisha never made it to class. By 8:15, her homeroom teacher marked her absent. By noon, Tanya was frantic, calling neighbors, friends, and the police. Aisha had vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but questions and a town gripped by fear. What happened to Aisha Thompson? Where could she have gone? For 8 long years, her disappearance haunted her family, her community, and the detectives who combed through every lead, every rumor, every dead end. Then, in 2025, a group of electricians working on an old house made a discovery in a dusty, forgotten crawlspace, a discovery that would turn this mystery upside down and leave everyone reeling. Aisha wasn't just any teenager. She was the kind of girl who lit up a room. Her friends called her Sunshine because she had this way of making people feel seen, feel heard. She'd help a kid with their homework, share her lunch with someone who forgot theirs, or just listen when you needed to talk. Tanya always said Aisha had an old soul, wise beyond her years, with dreams of becoming a nurse so she could help people. That morning, she'd been wearing her favorite blue hoodie, the one with the little heart embroidered on the sleeve, and jeans with a rip at the knee. She'd promised her mom she'd be home right after school to help bake cookies for a church fundraiser. But as the hours ticked by and Aisha didn't show up, Tanya's gut told her something was wrong. Really wrong. The police searched the route to school, interviewed classmates, checked security cameras. Nothing. No witnesses, no clues, no Aisha. The town rallied at first. Vigils, flyers, search parties scouring the woods and fields. But as weeks turned to months, then years, hope faded. People stopped talking about Aisha. Life moved on. Except for Tanya, who never stopped waiting, never stopped praying for her little girl to come home. Fast forward to 2025, and the town had changed. New families moved in, old houses got renovated, but Aisha's story lingered like a ghost. Kids told it like an urban legend, whispering about the girl who disappeared on Maple Street. Meanwhile, in a rundown house on the edge of town, a crew of electricians was called in to fix some faulty wiring. The place had been empty for years, passed from one owner to another, mostly used as a rental. The crawl space under the house was a nightmare, dark, cramped, full of cobwebs and dust. One of the workers, a guy named Mike, was squeezing through, flashlight in hand, when he saw something that made his blood run cold. Tucked behind a tangle of old pipes was a small, weathered box, barely bigger than a shoebox. It didn't belong there, not in a place like this. His hands shook as he pulled it out, the weight of it feeling heavier than it should. What was inside that box? And what did it have to do with Aisha's disappearance? The answer would shake the town to its core, but that's not where this story ends. Because this isn't just about Aisha, it's about a single act of kindness that sparked a chain of events no one could have predicted. Let's rewind for a moment to a different story, one that happened just a few weeks before Aisha vanished. It was a crowded bus ride, the kind where everyone's packed in like sardines, and Aisha was heading home from a school club meeting. She noticed a pregnant woman, pale and tired, struggling to stand as the bus lurched along. Without a second thought, Aisha stood up and offered her seat. The woman, Emily, was so grateful she almost cried. They got to talking, Aisha's warmth breaking through Emily's exhaustion, and before she got off, Emily scribbled something on a piece of paper and pressed it into Aisha's hand. "You're an angel," she said, her eyes shining. Aisha tucked the note into her pocket and forgot about it. But that note, that small, crumpled piece of paper, would turn out to be a key to everything. What did it say? Why did it matter? And how did it connect to the Crawlspace discovery 8 years later? The truth is stranger than you could imagine, and it's a truth that's been hiding in plain sight all along. Now, picture that Ohio town again, caught between its quiet routine and the shadow of Aisha's mystery. The Electricians' discovery sent whispers racing through the streets. People gathered at the diner, the grocery store, the church, piecing together theories. Was the box Aisha's? Did it hold answers, or more questions? Tanya, now in her 40s, her hair streaked with gray from years of grief, got the call from the police late that evening. "Mrs. Thompson, you need to come down to the station," they said. Her heart pounded as she drove, hope and dread twisting together. For 8 years, she'd clung to the idea that Aisha was out there, somewhere alive. But the Crawlspace wasn't a place of hope. It was a place of secrets, of things meant to stay buried. As Tanya walked into the station, she braced herself for the worst. What had the Electricians found? Was it proof Aisha was gone forever, or something else entirely? And what about that note from the bus, the one Aisha had tucked away? The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was one nobody could have expected. This story isn't just about a girl who vanished. It's about the ripple effects of kindness, the weight of secrets, and the way a single moment can change lives forever. Aisha's disappearance broke her town, but what the Electricians found might just break it open again. And that note, the one from Emily, the pregnant woman on the bus, it's more than a thank you. It's a clue, a spark, a life-changing message that ties Aisha's fate to something bigger. What was in that box? What do the notes say? And how do they connect to a truth that's been buried for 8 years? Stick around, because the answers are coming, and they're going to leave you speechless. Tanya Thompson sat in the police station, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The officer across from her, Detective Harris, was a familiar face, too familiar. He'd been a rookie when Aisha disappeared, full of promises to bring her daughter home. Now, 8 years later, his face was lined with the weight of too many unsolved cases, but his eyes still softened when he looked at Tanya. He slid a small evidence bag across the table, and inside was the weathered box the Electricians had found in the Crawlspace. It was wooden, no bigger than a cigar box, with faded carvings on the lid that looked like they'd been scratched in by hand. Tanya's breath caught as she stared at it. "Is it hers?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Harris didn't answer right away. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "We don't know yet, Tanya. But we need you to look at it. See if anything feels familiar." Her fingers hovered over the bag, afraid to touch it, afraid of what it might mean. The box wasn't just a box, it was a Pandora's box, threatening to spill secrets that could either heal her or shatter her all over again. Back in 2017, Aisha's disappearance had torn through the town like a wildfire. Maple Street, where she'd last been seen, was the kind of place where kids rode bikes and neighbors chatted over fences. It wasn't a place where people vanished. The police had interviewed everyone, classmates, teachers, even the grumpy old man who ran the corner store. Aisha's best friend, Kayla, swore she'd seen Aisha stop to talk to someone near the school that morning, but the details were fuzzy. "It was just a guy," Kayla had said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know, maybe in a car? I wasn't paying attention." The lead went nowhere. The grainy footage from a gas station camera a block away showed Aisha's blue hoodie for a split second, then nothing. No car, no stranger, no clue. Tanya had replayed that footage in her mind 1,000,000 times, searching for something the police missed. She'd walk Maple Street at night, tracing her daughter's steps, as if the sidewalk itself could tell her where Aisha went. But the street stayed silent, and so did the town, until that box showed up. The Electricians who found it were just as shaken as Tanya. Mike, the one who'd pulled it from the Crawlspace, couldn't stop talking about how wrong it felt. "I've been in 100 crawlspaces," he told his crew later, over beers at the local bar. "You find weird stuff sometimes, old tools, kids' toys, whatever. But this was different. It was like someone hid it there on purpose." The house itself was a mystery. It had been a rental for years, with tenants coming and going, none staying long. The current owner, some out-of-state investor, barely knew the place existed. When the police started digging into its history, they found a long list of names, families, drifters, even a few sketchy types who'd paid cash and left no paper trail. Could one of them have known Aisha? Could one of them have been the guy Kayla saw her talking to? The box was now at the station under lock and key, but opening it wasn't so simple. It was sealed tight, and the carvings on the lid, swirls and letters that didn't quite make sense, felt like a code no one could crack yet. Meanwhile, the note from the bus, the one Emily had given Aisha, was starting to feel like more than a coincidence. Tanya hadn't known about it until a week after Aisha vanished, when she found it crumpled in the pocket of her daughter's favorite hoodie. The police had dismissed it at the time, just a kind gesture, they said, nothing to do with the case. But Tanya had kept it, tucked in a drawer with Aisha's things, unable to let it go. The note was simple, written in hurried cursive. "You're a blessing. If you ever need anything, call me. Emily." There was a phone number, too, but when Tanya tried it, it was disconnected. She tracked down Emily eventually, a single mom who'd moved to a nearby city after her baby was born. Emily remembered Aisha vividly, her eyes welling up when Tanya mentioned her name. "She was so kind," Emily had said. "I was having the worst day, and she just made it better." But Emily didn't know anything about Aisha's disappearance. Or did she? Tanya couldn't shake the feeling that the note meant something, especially now, with this box turning up like a ghost from the past. The town was buzzing again, just like it had 8 years ago. At the diner on Main Street, locals swapped theories over coffee. Some said Aisha had run away, maybe gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd. Others whispered darker things, that she'd been taken, that the box held proof of something awful. The Electricians' find had reopened old wounds, and Tanya felt the weight of every stare as she walked through town. She'd never stopped believing Aisha was alive, but the Crawlspace discovery made her doubt creep in. What if the box held something final? A piece of clothing, a lock of hair, something that said Aisha was gone for good? She pushed the thought away, focusing on the note instead. Emily's words kept circling in her mind. "If you ever need anything, call me." Had Aisha needed something? Had she reached out to Emily or someone else before she vanished? And why was that box hidden in a house no one seemed to care about? Detective Harris wasn't giving much away. He'd seen too many families get their hopes up, only to be crushed. But even he couldn't hide the unease in his voice when he talked about the box. "We're waiting on forensics," he told Tanya. "It's old, but we're being careful. Don't want to miss anything." He didn't mention the carvings, but Tanya had caught a glimpse of them in the evidence bag, letters that might have spelled a name, or a word, or nothing at all. She wanted to demand they open it right then, but protocol was protocol. The wait was agony. As she drove home that night, the streets of her town felt different, like they were hiding something just out of sight. Maple Street, the school, the old rental house, it was all connected. She could feel it. And that note, that small act of kindness on a bus, was the thread tying it all together. What had Aisha known? What had she carried with her that day? And what was waiting in that box, ready to change everything? The police station was quiet the next morning, save for the hum of a coffee machine and the occasional crackle of a radio. Tanya sat in her car outside, staring at the building, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She hadn't slept. The image of that carved wooden box haunted her, its secrets locked away behind evidence tape. Detective Harris had promised to call as soon as forensics had something, but the waiting was tearing her apart. Every creak of her house last night had felt like a whisper, every shadow a clue. She couldn't stop thinking about Aisha's note from Emily, still tucked in that drawer at home. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt like a lifeline, a thread connecting her daughter to the world she'd vanished from. Tanya wasn't the only one feeling the strain. The town was alive with rumors, each one wilder than the last. At the diner, old Mr. Jenkins swore he'd seen a stranger lingering near Maple Street back in 2017, someone in a dark jacket who didn't belong. Across town, Kayla, now 22 and working at the local library, was digging through her own memories, trying to recall the face of the guy she'd seen Aisha talking to that morning. The box in the crawlspace had stirred something up, and it wasn't just answers. It was fear, guilt, and a sense that the truth might be uglier than anyone wanted to admit. Kayla hadn't talked about Aisha in years. It hurt too much. They'd been inseparable since 5th grade, sharing secrets and dreams over late-night phone calls. Kayla still blamed herself for not walking with Aisha that day, for not paying closer attention to the man she'd glimpsed near the school. She'd been distracted, texting her crush, barely noticing Aisha stop at the corner. Now, with the news of the crawlspace discovery spreading, Kayla couldn't sit still. She started pulling old yearbooks from the library's archives, flipping through photos, hoping something would jog her memory. There was one picture that stopped her cold. Aisha at a school dance, laughing, her blue hoodie slung over a chair. Next to her was a substitute teacher, Mr. Carter, who'd only been at the school for a month before Aisha disappeared. He'd been quiet, unremarkable, but something about his smile in the photo made Kayla's stomach twist. Had he been the one Aisha stopped to talk to? The police had questioned him back then, along with everyone else, but he'd had an alibi, some conference out of town. Kayla wasn't so sure anymore. She scribbled his name on a sticky note and shoved it in her pocket, wondering if she was chasing ghosts or something real. Meanwhile, Mike, the electrician who'd found the box, was struggling to shake the unease that had settled over him. He'd been in the trade for 15 years, seen all kinds of weird stuff in old houses, rusted knives, forgotten diaries, even a creepy doll once. But this box was different. The carvings on it weren't random. They felt deliberate, like someone had poured time into making them. He hadn't told the cops, but he'd snapped a quick photo with his phone before handing it over. Late that night, he showed it to his wife, Sarah, who squinted at the grainy image. "Looks like letters," she said, tracing her finger over the screen. "Maybe a name?" Something." Mike didn't want to get involved, but he couldn't let it go. He started asking around, quietly, about the house's history. A buddy who worked in real estate mentioned a tenant from years back, a guy who'd paid in cash and kept to himself. No one knew much about him, but he'd left in a hurry right around the time Aisha vanished. Mike didn't like where his mind was going, but the pieces were starting to form a picture, one he wasn't sure he wanted to see. Back at the police station, Detective Harris was piecing together his own puzzle. The box was still with forensics, but early tests showed traces of something strange, fibers that didn't match anything in the house, and a faint chemical smell that suggested it had been sealed with something more than just a lock. Harris had been on the force long enough to know that small towns hid big secrets. He'd grown up here, knew every street, every family, every rumor. Aisha's case had been his first big one, and it still stung that he'd never cracked it. He'd interviewed Emily, the woman from the bus, back in 2017. She'd seemed genuine, just a tired mom-to-be who'd been touched by Aisha's kindness. But now, with the note resurfacing in Tanya's mind, Harris was reconsidering. He pulled Emily's old file. She'd moved to Dayton after her son was born, started a new life. Her number was disconnected, but Harris found a new one through a contact in Dayton PD. When he called, Emily's voice was hesitant, like she'd been expecting the call but dreading it. "I don't know anything," she said quickly. "Aisha was just nice. That's all." But Harris caught a tremor in her tone, something she wasn't saying. Was she hiding something, or was she just scared? Tanya, meanwhile, was back home, sitting at her kitchen table with Aisha's hoodie spread out in front of her. She'd pulled the note out again, its edges worn from years of handling. "You're a blessing. If you ever need anything, call me. Emily." The words felt heavier now, like they carried a weight Tanya hadn't noticed before. She thought about Aisha's last days, how she'd seemed quieter than usual, maybe distracted. Tanya had chalked it up to teenage stuff, school stress, maybe a crush. But now she wondered if Aisha had been carrying a secret. Had she called Emily? Had she needed help and not told her mom? Tanya's eyes drifted to a photo on the fridge, Aisha and her at the county fair, both laughing, cotton candy in hand. The memory felt like a knife. She didn't want to believe the box held bad news, but the crawlspace wasn't a place for happy endings. What if it held proof Aisha had been hurt? Or worse, what if it pointed to someone in town, someone they all knew? The town itself was fracturing under the weight of the mystery. At the church, Pastor Green was planning a vigil for Aisha, hoping to bring people together. But not everyone was on board. Some folks whispered that the police were wasting time, that Aisha was long gone. Others pointed fingers at old tenants, at strangers, even at each other. Kayla, still haunted by that yearbook photo, started asking around about Mr. Carter. A few former classmates remembered him as odd, always lingering after class, asking personal questions. Mike, meanwhile, was digging into the rental house's past, tracking down names of tenants who'd lived there in 2017. And Tanya, clutching that note, was starting to wonder if Emily knew more than she'd let on. The box sat at the center of it all, its carvings a silent taunt. What was inside? Who had hidden it? And why did it feel like the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for the truth to break free? The air in the police station felt thicker now, heavy with the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Tanya stood outside the evidence room, her heart hammering so loud she was sure Detective Harris could hear it. It was late, the clock ticking past 10 p.m., and the call had come just an hour ago. Forensics had finally cracked open the box from the crawlspace. Harris hadn't said much on the phone, just, "You need to be here, Tanya. Now." She'd driven through the dark streets, her mind racing with images of what might be inside. A piece of Aisha's hoodie, a letter, something that would either bring her daughter back or confirm her worst fears. The station was nearly empty, just a janitor mopping the floor and a young officer at the desk, avoiding her eyes. Harris met her at the door, his face unreadable, and led her to a small room where the box sat on a metal table, its lid now open but its contents hidden from view. "We're still processing it," he said, his voice low. "But there's something you need to see." Tanya's hands shook as she stepped closer, the carvings on the box, those strange, swirling letters, seeming to pulse under the harsh lights. Whatever was inside, it was about to change everything. Across town, Kayla was pacing her tiny apartment, the sticky note with Mr. Carter's name crumpled in her fist. She'd spent the day digging, calling old classmates, even tracking down a retired teacher who'd worked with him. The more she learned, the more uneasy she felt. Mr. Carter had been a substitute, in and out of the school in just a few weeks, but he'd left an impression. One girl remembered him asking Aisha to stay after class once, something about helping with a project. Another said he'd been seen near Maple Street around the time Aisha vanished, though no one could confirm it. Kayla's gut told her he was connected, but she had no proof, just a hunch and a yearbook photo that made her skin crawl. She'd called Detective Harris earlier, leaving a voicemail about Carter, but he hadn't called back. Now, with the news about the box spreading like wildfire, she couldn't sit still. She grabbed her keys and headed for the police station, determined to make someone listen. What if Carter had been the man she'd seen Aisha talking to? What if he'd lived in that rental house, hiding something in the crawlspace? Mike, the electrician, was at home, but sleep was out of the question. He kept staring at the photo of the box on his phone, zooming in on the carvings. His wife, Sarah, had been right. They looked like letters, maybe initials. AISH, Aisha? His stomach churned. He tried to stay out of it, to let the cops handle things, but the more he thought about that house, the more it gnawed at him. He'd gone back to the rental property that afternoon, poking around the yard while the owner wasn't there. Under a pile of leaves near the back porch, he'd found something odd, a rusted key, small and old, like it belonged to something specific. A lockbox? A diary? He didn't know, but he'd slipped it into his pocket, unsure whether to turn it over to the police or keep digging on his own. The house felt alive with secrets, its creaky floors and peeling paint hiding more than just bad wiring. Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stumbled into something bigger than he was ready for, and the key in his pocket felt like it was burning a hole through his jeans. At the station, Tanya stood frozen as Harris pulled a single item from the box, a small, faded journal, its cover worn and stained. "It's not Aisha's," he said quickly, seeing the panic in her eyes. "But we think it's connected." He opened it carefully, revealing pages filled with tight, hurried handwriting. Tanya leaned closer, her breath catching as she saw a name scrawled on the first page. Emily. The woman from the bus. Her heart sank. Was Emily involved? Had she lied all those years ago? The note Aisha had kept. "You're a blessing. If you ever need anything, call me," suddenly felt like a trap. Harris flipped to a marked page, showing Tanya a list of names, some crossed out, some circled. Aisha's name was there, underlined twice. Tanya's knees buckled, and she grabbed the table for support. "What is this?" she whispered. Harris shook his head. "We're not sure yet. It could be nothing, or it could be everything. We're trying to find Emily now." Tanya's mind spun. Emily had seemed so kind, so genuine. But what if she'd known something? What if that note had pulled Aisha into something dangerous? Kayla burst into the station just as Tanya was leaving the evidence room, her face pale and her eyes wild. "I need to talk to Harris," she said, breathless. The officer at the desk tried to calm her, but Kayla pushed past, spotting Tanya in the hallway. "Tanya, I think I know something," she blurted. "That substitute, Mr. Carter, he was at the school, and I think he talked to Aisha that day. I saw him, I swear." Tanya's eyes widened, her mind racing to connect the dots. Carter, Emily, the journal, the box. It was all colliding, but nothing made sense yet. Harris stepped out, looking exhausted. "Kayla, slow down," he said, but his voice had an edge. He'd just gotten off the phone with Dayton PD, who'd tracked Emily to a small apartment where she lived with her now 8-year-old son. She'd agreed to come in for questioning, but her voice had been shaky, like she was hiding something or running from it. The town was on edge now, the vigil at the church drawing a crowd that spilled onto the street. Pastor Green spoke of hope and healing, but the whispers in the crowd were about the box, the journal, and what it all meant. Some said it was proof Aisha was gone. Others swore she was still out there, waiting to be found. Mike, standing at the back of the vigil, clutched the rusted key in his pocket, wondering if it unlocked the journal or something worse. Kayla, still shaken from her outburst at the station, scanned the crowd, half expecting to see Mr. Carter's face among them. Tanya, standing alone near the church steps, held Aisha's hoodie, the note from Emily tucked inside. The journal's list of names burned in her mind, Aisha's name underlined like a warning. What had her daughter stumbled into? Was it a random act of kindness on a bus that had set this all in motion, or something darker? The air crackled with tension, every question leading to another, every clue pointing to a truth that was just out of reach. As Emily's car pulled into town, headlights cutting through the night, the stage was set for a reckoning, but the answers were still locked away, waiting to explode. The church vigil was winding down, the crowd thinning as candles flickered in the chilly night air. Tanya stood frozen on the steps, clutching Aisha's hoodie, the weight of Emily's note and the journal's cryptic list pressing against her chest. The town felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the next piece of the puzzle to drop. Emily's car had just pulled into the police station parking lot, its headlights casting long shadows across the asphalt. Tanya watched from a distance, her stomach twisting as Emily stepped out, her face pale under the streetlights. She was older now, her hair pulled back tightly, her 8-year-old son trailing behind her, clinging to her hand. Tanya wanted to run to her, to demand answers about the note, about why Aisha's name was in that journal, but her feet wouldn't move. Something about Emily's posture, tense, almost scared, made Tanya wonder if she was walking into the station as a witness or a suspect. Before she could decide whether to follow, her phone buzzed with a text from Kayla. "Found something about Carter.
Meet me at the library."
Now. Tanya's heart raced. The pieces were moving faster now, but they weren't fitting together, not yet. Kayla was already at the library when Tanya arrived, her laptop open on a table cluttered with old yearbooks and newspaper clippings. The dim glow of the screen lit up her face, her eyes wide with something between fear and excitement. "Look at this," she whispered, sliding the laptop toward Tanya. It was an article from a small newspaper in a neighboring county, dated a month after Aisha's disappearance. The headline read, "Local man questioned in missing teen case, released." Below it was a grainy photo of Mr. Carter, the substitute teacher, his face half hidden by a baseball cap. The article mentioned he'd been a person of interest in a different missing person case, a teenage girl who'd vanished in a town 2 hours away. He'd been cleared, but the coincidence sent a chill down Tanya's spine. He was at our school, Kayla said, her voice shaking. And he lived in that rental house. I checked the old tenant records at the library. His name's there, Tanya. He was there in 2017. Tanya's mind reeled. Carter. The journal. The box in the crawlspace. Was he the key to Aisha's disappearance? And what did Emily have to do with it? At the police station, Emily sat across from Detective Harris, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Her son was in another room, coloring with a female officer, oblivious to the storm brewing. Harris slid the journal across the table, his eyes locked on hers. You need to tell me everything, he said, his voice calm but firm. Your name's in here. Aisha's name is in here. What were you involved in? Emily's face crumpled, tears welling up. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know what it meant. She explained that the note she'd given Aisha on the bus wasn't just a thank you. It was an invitation. She'd been part of a community outreach group, one that helped at-risk teens find mentorship and support. She'd seen Aisha's kindness and thought she'd be a perfect fit to join. The phone number on the note was for the group's organizer, a man she only knew as C. Emily had never met him in person, only communicated through calls and emails. But after Aisha disappeared, the number went dead, and the group seemed to vanish overnight. Harris leaned forward, his jaw tight. This C. Did he ever mention a last name? Anything at all? Emily shook her head, but then her eyes widened.
Wait.
There was a meeting once at a house. I didn't go, but they sent an address. It was on Maple Street. The words hit Harris like a punch. Maple Street. The same street where Aisha was last seen. The same street that ran past the rental house where the box was found. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the connections were piling up too fast to ignore. He excused himself and called the forensics team, demanding an update on the journal. The tech on the line sounded rattled. We found something else in the box, she said.
A key.
Small, old, like it fits a lockbox or a safe. And there's a partial fingerprint on it. Not enough to run yet, but we're working on it. Harris's mind raced back to the journal's list of names, Aisha's underlined twice. Was the key meant to open something else hidden in that house? Or somewhere else entirely? He glanced back at Emily, who was wiping her eyes, and wondered how deep this went. Was she a pawn in something bigger, or was she holding back the truth? Mike, meanwhile, was at home, staring at the rusted key he'd found near the rental house. He hadn't told anyone about it, not even Sarah. It felt wrong to keep it, but turning it over to the police meant admitting he'd been snooping. He turned it over in his hands, noticing a tiny engraving on the side, a single letter, C. His heart skipped a beat. Was it a coincidence, or was this key tied to the box, the journal, maybe even Aisha herself? He thought about the carvings on the box, AISH and now this C. The pieces were starting to feel like a puzzle, but the picture was still blurry. He grabbed his phone and texted his buddy from the real estate office, asking for more details on the tenant who'd lived in the house in 2017. The reply came back fast. Guy's name was Carter. Paid cash, left no forwarding address. Weird dude. Mike's blood ran cold. Carter. The same name Kayla had been chasing. He didn't know what it all meant, but he knew he couldn't sit on this any longer. Tanya and Kayla left the library, their minds buzzing with the new information. The night felt heavier now, the stars hidden behind thick clouds. Tanya clutched Aisha's hoodie, the note still tucked inside, as they drove toward the police station. If Carter was in that house, Tanya said, her voice barely above a whisper, and if he knew Emily's group, what was he doing with Aisha? Kayla didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the road. She was thinking about the man she'd seen that morning in 2017, the one Aisha had stopped to talk to. The memory was fuzzy, but it was coming back in flashes. A dark jacket, a low voice, a car idling nearby. Was it Carter? And if it was, what had he wanted with her friend? As they pulled into the station parking lot, they saw Emily stepping out, her son in tow, her face streaked with tears. Harris was behind her, his expression grim. Tanya's heart pounded as she got out of the car, the hoodie in her hands, the note burning a hole in her pocket. The key, the journal, Carter, Emily, it was all converging, and the truth was closer than ever. But as Tanya took a step toward the station, a car sped past, its tires screeching, and for a split second, she swore she saw a man in a dark jacket behind the wheel, his face hidden in the shadows. Tanya's heart stopped as the car sped past, its taillights vanishing into the night. The man in the dark jacket behind the wheel. Was it him? Was it Carter? She clutched Aisha's hoodie, the note from Emily crinkling in her pocket, and ran toward the police station, Kayla right behind her. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Detective Harris was pacing, his phone pressed to his ear, barking orders to a patrol unit. Emily sat in a corner, her son asleep in her lap, her face pale and drawn. The journal from the Crawlspace box lay open on the table, its pages marked with names, dates, and cryptic notes that had haunted Tanya's dreams. Harris hung up and turned to her, his eyes sharp. "We've got a lead on Carter," he said. "He's been spotted in town. We're closing in." Tanya's breath caught. After 8 years of dead ends, the man who might hold the key to Aisha's disappearance was within reach. But the journal, the key, Emily's note, it all pointed to something bigger, something that made her stomach churn. She handed Harris the note from Aisha's hoodie, her voice trembling. "This has to mean something. Emily's tied to this, isn't she?" Harris's jaw tightened as he glanced at Emily, who looked away, her hands shaking. The station buzzed with activity as officers prepared to move. Harris had pieced together enough from the journal to know that C wasn't just Carter. It was a code for a network, a shadowy group that targeted vulnerable teens under the guise of mentorship. Emily had been a pawn, unwittingly recruiting kids like Aisha with her kind words and promises of support. The journal listed names of teens who'd been helped, but some, like Aisha's, were underlined, marked for something else. Harris suspected Carter had been more than a substitute teacher. He was a recruiter, maybe worse. The key found in the box, with its faint C engraving, matched the one Mike had found near the rental house. It unlocked a hidden compartment in the journal, revealing a folded map with a single location circled, a warehouse on the outskirts of town, abandoned for years. Harris didn't wait. He assembled a team, leaving Tanya and Kayla with strict orders to stay put. But Tanya couldn't sit still. "I'm coming," she said, her voice fierce. "She's my daughter." Against his better judgment, Harris let her follow in a separate car, with Kayla by her side. The warehouse loomed in the darkness, its windows boarded up, its walls tagged with faded graffiti. The patrol cars moved in silently, lights off, as Harris and his team crept toward the entrance. Tanya and Kayla waited in the car, the tension suffocating. Tanya's eyes were glued to the warehouse door, her mind racing with images of Aisha, her smile, her blue hoodie, her dreams of being a nurse. Was she in there? Was she alive? The seconds dragged like hours until a shout broke the silence. Officers poured into the building, flashlights cutting through the dark. Tanya couldn't wait any longer. She bolted from the car, Kayla grabbing her arm, but she shook her off and ran toward the warehouse. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and the faint smell of oil. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, and in the corner, a figure moved, Carter. He was older now, his hair graying, but it was him, his dark jacket unmistakable. He froze as Harris's voice boomed, "Hands up." But Carter didn't comply. He lunged for a side door, only to be tackled by 2 officers. In the chaos, Tanya's eyes darted to a small room in the back, its door ajar. She pushed past an officer, ignoring Harris's shouts, and stepped inside. There, on a dirty mattress, was a girl, thin, pale, her hair matted. Tanya's heart stopped. "Aisha," she whispered. The girl turned, her eyes wide with fear. But it wasn't Aisha. It was another teenager, maybe 15, her wrists bound with zip ties. Tanya's knees buckled, but she knelt beside the girl, cutting the ties with a pocket knife from her purse. "It's okay," she said, her voice breaking. "You're safe now." The girl sobbed, saying she'd been taken weeks ago, lured by a mentor who promised her a better life. Carter's network, it seemed, was still active, preying on kids just like Aisha. Harris stormed in, his face grim.
"We got him," he said.
"But there's more. The map, it's not just this warehouse. There are other locations." Carter's interrogation was brutal. He sat in cuffs, his smirk gone, as Harris laid out the evidence: the journal, the key, the map. Carter admitted to running the network, using his role as a substitute to scout vulnerable teens. Aisha had caught his eye because of her kindness, her willingness to trust. The note from Emily had been a test, a way to see if Aisha would reach out. She had calling the number, meeting Carter under the pretense of joining the mentorship group. But she'd grown suspicious, asking too many questions. Carter claimed she'd run off, that he'd never hurt her, but his story was shaky, his eyes darting to the journal. Tanya, watching through a one-way mirror, felt her heart shatter. Was Aisha alive, or was Carter lying to save himself? The journal mentioned a second site, a cabin in the woods an hour away. Harris was already organizing a search, but Tanya couldn't wait. She slipped out, taking Kayla with her, determined to find the cabin herself. They found it just before dawn, a rundown shack hidden in the trees. The door was unlocked, creaking as Tanya pushed it open. Inside, the air was cold, the floor littered with papers and empty food cans. In the corner, tucked under a blanket, was a small, familiar object, a blue hoodie with a heart embroidered on the sleeve. Tanya's breath caught as she picked it up, her hands trembling. It was Aisha's. But there was no sign of her daughter. As tears streamed down her face, Kayla called Harris, who arrived with his team. They searched the cabin, finding more evidence: photos, names, proof of Carter's network, but no Aisha. Tanya clutched the hoodie, refusing to believe it was over. Then, as the officers cleared out, Kayla noticed something carved into the wall, hidden behind a shelf. Aisha was here. Below it was a date, 2 weeks ago. Tanya's heart surged. Aisha was alive, or had been recently. The search wasn't over. But then came the twist no one saw coming. As Harris's team dug deeper into Carter's network, they traced the journal's origins to a name no one expected: Pastor Green, the man who'd organized the vigil. He wasn't just a bystander. He'd been funding the group, hiding behind his role in the church. The carved box, the key, the cabin, they all pointed back to him. He'd known about Aisha, known about Carter, and kept it quiet for years. As the police moved to arrest him, Tanya stood outside the cabin, Aisha's hoodie in her arms, the truth sinking in. The town she'd trusted, the people she'd leaned on, they'd been hiding secrets all along. Aisha was out there, and Tanya would find her, no matter what it took. But the shadow of Pastor Green's betrayal loomed large, and the question remained: where was Aisha now, and who else was still watching from the shadows? Tanya stood outside the cabin, clutching Aisha's blue hoodie, the heart embroidered on the sleeve, a painful reminder of the girl she'd lost 8 years ago. The carving on the wall: Aisha was here, dated just 2 weeks prior, burned in her mind, a flicker of hope in a sea of betrayal. Pastor Green's arrest had shaken the town to its core. The man who'd led vigils, who'd prayed with Tanya through her darkest days, was now in cuffs, his role in Carter's network exposed. The journal from the Crawlspace, the key, the map, they all pointed to a web of deception that stretched far beyond one man, one house, or one town. Tanya's legs trembled as she stared at the cabin, the early morning light filtering through the trees. Harris and his team were still inside, cataloging evidence, but Tanya couldn't wait. Aisha was alive, or had been recently, and every second felt like it was slipping away. Kayla stood beside her, her face pale but determined. "We're going to find her," Kayla said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Tanya nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. She wasn't alone anymore, but the weight of the truth was crushing. Pastor Green, Carter, Emily's note, it was all connected, and Aisha was still out there somewhere. The police station was a hive of activity by the time they returned. Pastor Green sat in an interrogation room, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a tight-lipped silence. Harris had uncovered more from the journal. Green hadn't just funded Carter's network, he'd helped orchestrate it, using his position in the church to identify vulnerable kids. The mentorship group Emily had been part of was a front, luring teens with promises of support before funneling them into something far darker. Some were coerced into petty crimes, others disappeared entirely. Aisha, it seemed, had been targeted because of her kindness, her willingness to trust. The note from Emily, that small act of gratitude on a bus, had been a trap, a way to draw Aisha into Carter's orbit. Emily, racked with guilt, had broken down in her second interview, admitting she'd suspected something was off but never imagined the full scope. "I thought I was helping kids," she sobbed, her son asleep in the next room. "I didn't know what they were doing." Tanya wanted to hate her, but seeing Emily's tears, she couldn't. Emily was a victim too, manipulated just like Aisha. Mike, the electrician, finally came forward with the rusted key he'd found near the rental house. He'd agonized over it, but the news of Green's arrest pushed him to act. He handed it to Harris, explaining where he'd found it and how it matched the key from the box. Forensics confirmed it unlocked a small safe hidden in the cabin's floorboards, missed in the initial search. Inside were documents, fake IDs, bank records, and a list of addresses stretching across 3 states. One address stood out, a farmhouse in rural Indiana, less than 2 hours away. Harris didn't hesitate. He assembled a team, this time with federal agents who'd been called in once the network scale became clear. Tanya insisted on going, her voice fierce. "I've waited 8 years. I'm not sitting this out." Harris relented, but only if she stayed in the command van. Kayla and Mike joined her, their unlikely trio bound by a shared need to find Aisha. As they drove through the dawn, Tanya clutched the hoodie, whispering prayers she hadn't said in years. The farmhouse was eerily quiet when they arrived, its paint peeling, its fields overgrown. The agents moved in cautiously, weapons drawn, while Tanya, Kayla, and Mike watched from the van, the tension suffocating. Minutes felt like hours until a crackle came over the radio. "We've got someone." Tanya's heart leapt as she leaned closer, straining to hear. The agent's voice was steady but urgent. "Female, early 20s, found in a locked room upstairs." Tanya shoved open the van door, ignoring Harris's protests, and ran toward the house. The agents tried to stop her, but she pushed past, her eyes locked on the front door. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the walls lined with faded photos of families who'd long since moved on. Upstairs, in a small room with a single window, stood a young woman, tall, thin, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes wide with fear. Tanya froze. The face was older, harder, but unmistakable. "Aisha," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The woman turned, and for a moment, time stopped. It was her. It was Aisha. Aisha's arms wrapped around Tanya, their sobs echoing in the cramped room. She was alive, but the years had left their mark. Her face was gaunt, her eyes haunted, but she was there, real, breathing. "Mom," she choked out, her voice raw. The agent stepped back, giving them space, as Kayla and Mike stood in the doorway, tears in their eyes. Aisha's story came out in fragments. She'd been lured by Carter's promises of a scholarship, a chance to help others. When she'd started asking questions, he panicked, taking her to the farmhouse, where she'd been held with other teens, moved between safe houses to keep the network hidden. Green's money had kept it all running, his influence silencing anyone who got too close. Aisha had escaped once, 2 weeks ago, leaving her hoodie and the carving in the cabin as a desperate plea for help, but she'd been caught again. The network was crumbling now, with Carter and Green in custody, but Aisha's rescue wasn't the end. There were others still out there, other kids trapped in the same web. The reunion was bittersweet. Tanya brought Aisha home, the town gathering to celebrate her return. The diner was packed, neighbors offering hugs and casseroles, but the joy was tempered by what Aisha had endured. She was 22 now, no longer the bright-eyed girl in the blue hoodie. She'd missed years of school, of friends, of her mother's love. Therapy would help, but the scars ran deep. Kayla, guilt-ridden for not doing more back then, became Aisha's anchor, helping her navigate the world she'd been torn from. Mike, too, found purpose, volunteering with a group that searched for missing kids, the rusted key a reminder of how close he'd come to the truth. Emily, cleared of any charges, moved away, unable to face the town's judgment. She sent Tanya a letter, apologizing again, promising to dedicate her life to helping others in Aisha's name. Tanya forgave her, knowing Aisha's kindness had started this chain, but also knowing it was that same kindness that had kept her daughter fighting. The final twist came a month later as the police dismantled the network. Among the documents in the farmhouse safe was a letter, written in Aisha's handwriting, dated a year after her disappearance. It was addressed to Tanya, but never sent. "Mom, I'm okay," it read. "I don't know if you'll ever see this, but I need you to know I'm fighting to come home. I love you." Tucked inside was a photo of Aisha, older but still smiling, holding a small notebook where she'd written her dreams, becoming a nurse, helping others, just like she'd always planned. The letter had been hidden by Carter, a trophy of his control, but it was proof of Aisha's strength. Tanya framed it, hanging it beside the photo from the county fair, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, Aisha had never given up. The town changed after that. The church got a new pastor, and the rental house was torn down, replaced by a community center named after Aisha. Tanya and Aisha spoke at its opening, sharing their story to raise awareness about missing kids. The crowd was silent as Aisha talked about her years in captivity, her voice steady but soft. "Kindness got me into this," she said, "but it also kept me going. I never stopped believing someone would find me." Tanya squeezed her hand, tears in her eyes. The takeaway was clear. Kindness could be a light in the darkness, but it could also be exploited. Vigilance, community, and hope were the shields against those who preyed on trust. As the crowd applauded, Tanya looked at Aisha, her daughter, her miracle, and knew they'd rebuild together. The mystery of the crawlspace, the note, the box, it had all led them here, to a truth that was both painful and healing. And somewhere, in the quiet of that moment, Tanya felt Aisha's old soul shining through, stronger than ever.